Because the effort to defund Planned Parenthood,
Matt Lynch.
there was a bill a couple of years ago, or maybe a little over a year ago, in the last General Assembly, did not make it through. And then this year, Tina Rogner, who sponsored a bill, and I co-sponsored a bill to defund Planned Parenthood. And just so you understand, we say defund Planned Parenthood, really, what it does is it sets the criteria for funding such that Planned Parenthood is way down to the bottom of the list. There had been attempts to outright say there's no money for Planned Parenthood in the past, which were found to be unconstitutional. But you can set up the parameters as such that they just don't qualify, which is what we did in Ohio. So effectively, it does defund Planned Parenthood. Now, that bill was in committee this past spring, and as the budget bill came through House Bill 59, it was put into the budget bill. And, you know, this is a kind of thing that you can complain about sometimes. The budget bill was over 3,000 pages long. The budget bill was talked about for months. There were various versions of the budget bill. The last version, over 3,000 pages, was given to me for review 4 days before we had to vote on it. And what happens in that situation is that all kinds of people you don't know about, from the governor on down, stick things in there that you may not like. Now, we stuck something in there we did like. We stuck in there defunding Planned Parenthood. And there were some other things. We had a provision that we got amended into the bill literally in the last 24 hours, which tried to stop a form of sex education which is going on in Ohio called gateway sex education. I won't go into it, but it's a very graphic, horrible way to teach children about sex.
Pornography.
And that provision was in, and then literally just hours before we voted on it, it was taken out again. And that's what happens in a 3,000-page bill. It gets all kinds of change. You don't even know what's in the bill. That bill, the budget bill overall, increased spending in Ohio by $10 billion and increased taxes on everybody in this room by increasing the sales tax and increasing the real estate taxes. And a bunch of us, in the end, didn't vote for it. I was only one of 6 Republicans that said that I cannot vote for a budget bill that increases spending and increases taxes, because I thought that's what the Democrats were about.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, all the Republicans voted for it, and so it did pass. But here is the odd little political truth. Because I'm not a very popular guy with the Republican Party in Columbus, and I may very well have a Republican primary challenger in a couple of months. And they're probably going to tell you that I voted against defunding Planned Parenthood.
Thank you.
Now, that's kind of crazy, because I am clearly one of the strongest pro-life guys in the Ohio House. I was obviously behind the heartbeat bill. I sponsored the bill to outlaw sex selection abortion. I supported defunding Planned Parenthood. But I did vote against the budget bill, which had this little provision in it to defund Planned Parenthood. So politics can be kind of a screwy kind of a game. Our goal, of course, was to get some of the taxes out, get the spending down. We certainly wanted to keep in the provision to defund Planned Parenthood. But that's the only good thing that really happened in that budget bill. So it's very disappointing. I will tell you that 2 nights before we voted on the budget bill, there were 12 of us, 12 conservatives, meeting until 11 o'clock at night, all promising to one another that we were going to vote against the budget bill. If we did, we actually would have controlled the agenda, sort of what you saw happening in Washington the last few months, where the small Tea Party group was really controlling the agenda in the House. We could have done the same thing in Columbus, and we really would have controlled the budget and been able to reduce spending. But between Tuesday night at 11 o'clock, when we were promising each other we were going to all vote together against the budget bill, and Thursday morning, when the vote actually took place, 6 of those 12 were peeled away. Some were given things, and bills that were supported, and promises that were made, and so forth. And it was probably the lowest point I've had in the Ohio House since I've been there last year and a half, because I saw people that I wanted to trust and that seemed to be good conservatives really giving in, collapsing, in order to get some other political goal met. Not unlike what you see happening in Washington right now, and I know we're all disappointed in a lot of what's going on. But all of that to say, we did defund plan preparedness, that's wonderful, but actually it was a very, very, very poor budget. And I want to take some joy in that small victory, but really for the state of Ohio, it was not a victory in the long run. One of the things that had been in the budget was also provision to prevent Medicaid expansion. Now, Medicaid expansion is part of the foundation of Obamacare in Ohio, and Obamacare really is just another Trojan horse for the government to pay for abortions. There are a lot of reasons to be against Obamacare, but that's a very good reason right there. So in the budget, a provision had been put in that essentially said that there'd be no Medicaid expansion in Ohio by the governor, because there had been some fear that the governor could independently do Medicaid expansion without the legislature's permission through a group called the Controlling Board. And if any of you know anything about the state of Ohio, the Controlling Board has certain administrative functions, but they believe that the governor could, through the Controlling Board, get Medicaid expansion. We put that provision in the budget to stop that, but the governor vetoed that provision. So that restriction never occurred. And as of last week, the governor had announced that he was indeed going to expand Medicaid through the Controlling Board. The vote on that will happen Monday.
Oh, man.
Last week, 38 members of the Ohio House of Representatives filed a formal constitutional protest with the clerk of the Ohio House of Representatives. There's a provision in the Ohio, I was talking to somebody about the Ohio Constitution, how we can't get copies of it. There's a very unique provision in the Ohio Constitution that allows members of the House to file a formal constitutional protest if we think some action is being taken that is clearly a violation of the Constitution. 38 members of the House signed that, including the Speaker of the House. So it was a very strong statement of condemnation of what the governor said he was going to do. That was filed on Wednesday. It really was a historical moment. It hasn't happened in decades. The last time it happened with any significant impact was in the early 80s. And some folks hoped, I didn't really believe this, but some folks hoped that the governor would see this protest and he would back down. Mm-hmm. Well, he saw the protest, so he's not backing down. And every indication is that on Monday the Controlling Board will vote to expand Medicaid in Ohio and take billions of dollars in federal money that frankly we don't have in order to put more people on Medicaid and really enslave them in a system of poor health care and dependence on the federal government. If that happens on Monday, as we expect, then Monday night or Monday afternoon or Tuesday, a lawsuit will be filed in the Ohio Supreme Court, an original action. It's called a mandamus action. Essentially, it's an action to compel the state to do or not do something. And we are blessed that we have lawyers that are stepping up, that are willing to take this case. I was called just an hour and a half ago and asked if I would be the plaintiff, the named plaintiff on that case to sue the governor. This is not the way to make friends and influence people.
You don't need to.
But I said I would. I said I would.
Yeah.
But it is because of things like this that when I tell you that I may very well have a primary challenge next spring, because the Republican Party is no happier with me in Columbus than John Boehner is with Ted Cruz in Washington. They have an agenda that is distinctly not conservative, distinctly not Christian. It's all about maintaining power. Mm-hmm. And if the conservative values happen to line up with them maintaining their power, fine. But if they don't, the values go out the window. Because it's all about the power. So I ask all really to pray for me and pray for this process, because and you have to understand, and this is a little bit dry, but it's important to understand. We all know, I hope, in this country we have what's called a balance of power. We have a balanced government. We have a legislature, we have an executive, we have a judicial. What's called separation of powers. Right. Our forefathers did that at the federal level. We do it at the state levels as well for a reason. Because we don't want too much power in the hands of one group or even one person. Because if one branch of government has too much power, that power is abused. I don't know, you might think Barack Obama, for instance, you know? I mean, that's what you get when, and we've seen this at the federal level, frankly, for decades, where the Congress, because they have weak backbones and not political fears, they just, well, you know, let the executive do it. Let the president make the decision. Let him decide when to go to war. Let him decide what to do. Then we won't take the heat. And what has happened as a result? As a result, we have a president, which some call an imperial president, who's willing to abuse that authority, and we all suffer the consequences. It's the same thing that's happening here in Ohio. Our governor, who I want to love, I want to love John Kasich. He's a Republican. He says he's a conservative. I want to love John Kasich. I want to support him. But when the governor tries to do an end run around the legislature, you know, we've been debating in the Ohio House for months, ever since really February, about Medicaid expansion. And we have successfully prevented it from going forward in the Ohio House, and that's great. But for him to essentially do an end run around the legislature and impose Medicaid expansion by, in effect, executive order through this controlling board, but he's able to control the controlling board. By doing that, it's not just about Medicaid anymore. Now it's about the separation of powers. It's about the essence of how we maintain our republic and our liberty by diffusing authority among the various branches of government. And by attacking that system, he is attacking the integrity of the legislature and the integrity of our state. And I simply can't be quiet while our liberty is at stake. So
Thank you.
as this process goes forward, and it's hard to say how much of this is even going to be seen in the papers, because even the protest we filed last week, I haven't really seen much about it. You know, we had 38 sign that document. We're all down there sort of huddled and wondering, you know, is the lightning going to come out of the sky? But nobody paid attention. Partially because of what's happening in Washington. So, but I'll take questions in a moment. But so, you know, please pray about that and pay attention about that, because we're really on the firing line of trying to withhold our constitutional right of Columbus by way of this Medicaid expansion and the abuse of authority that is coming. So I made myself a couple of notes because I didn't want to forget to say something. And finally, let me talk a little bit about the conservatives in the Ohio House and about the other controversy that's going on. First, you should understand something, and frankly, I wouldn't have understood this, but it's incredible the authority that the Speaker of the House maintains over the legislature. If the Speaker of the House says this bill is not going to move, that bill doesn't move, period. Just period, that's it. So it's very extreme how that authority is implemented. So whoever is the Speaker of the House is an extremely important thing. And I mentioned this group of us that tried to oppose Medicaid expansion. We've actually had a group of a meeting every week that we're in session down in Columbus. Conservatives, Christians who are praying and working to try to defend our liberty. And we have all gotten behind Representative Tina Rogner, who's a representative out of Summit County. She's a wonderful person and a wonderful Christian and a wonderful conservative. And we're trying to support her to have her in a position to be Speaker Pro Tem in the next session, which is sort of like Vice President, and put her in a place to be actually Speaker of the House in the session after that. I'd ask your prayers about that. There's a lot of give and take going on, a lot of frustration. But if we can have a solid conservative as Speaker of the House, it'll go a long way to not only get bills passed that support, you know, the conservative agenda and the Christian agenda, but it will really, we'll be able to bring more conservatives in, because the Speaker of the House not only controls the legislative agenda, the Speaker controls the political agenda in the Republican Party. And so it's an extremely powerful thing on the edge of winning that race, but it's not easy. There's a lot of pushback, as you might imagine. The governor has his own horse in the race, so to speak, and there are liberals in the Republican caucus that have their own candidate. So there's a lot of give and take. And one of the interesting realities is how the folks in the Republicans House respond to what I would, I never really thought of myself as a conservative. I was just, an American. I grew up believing in the Constitution. Who knew that was extreme? And so when you take positions as a conservative and you say, hey, this is the conservative way, the other Republicans in the House, they get angry at you. Because even if they tell you, oh, I really agree with you, Matt, but I can't vote that way. When you stand up and do vote that way, it makes them look bad. That's why the John McCains of the world and the John Boehners of the world get so angry at the conservatives. If you got them in a room, they might even say they agreed with the conservatives. But they don't want, for whatever reason, to actually vote that way. And when you do vote that way, it puts the lie to their claim that they're conservatives. And they don't like that. They don't like that embarrassment and that pushback. So it's important, not only at the federal level, but certainly at the Ohio level, to support the legislators. I mentioned to somebody that the Columbus Dispatch 3 or 4 weeks ago had an article on the Sunday paper complaining about how conservative the Ohio House of Representatives had become. And it named the top 10 arch-conservative troublemakers in the Ohio House. And I was on the list. So that doesn't get you applause everywhere, trust me. So, it was designed to be a criticism, and in that sense, it hurts me, And if we file this lawsuit next week, that won't help me much either. So, I always say, folks, and we were talking about this earlier, this is a spiritual battle we're in for the soul of our citizens and the soul of our nation. We have to work hard, and we have to pray hard. If we don't do both, we're going to lose. So I ask you for your hard work, certainly in political issues, but your prayers most of all. So with that, I'll take a question or two for you.
Just quickly, I was going to say, we just received a postcard in the mail today about urgent to fight against
The Medicaid expansion, yes.
I don't remember who it was, but...
It was probably one of the Liberty groups. The Ohio Liberty Council has been very involved in the fight against Medicaid expansion. The interesting thing is, again, some of the backstory, the controlling board is a 7-member board. So, and the role of the controlling board is supposed to be to expend funds that come into the Ohio Treasury after the budget is passed. So you pass a budget, and we only passed a $120 billion budget. Oh my gosh, $120 billion. But believe it or not, money can come in that was not anticipated. And so, what do you do with that money? Well, the controlling board is supposed to spend that money more or less in conformity with the budget. The language of the statute actually says the controlling board can spend the funds as long as it conforms to the intent of the legislature. All right, so who knows what that means? And in most cases, this is an administrative function. It's, it could be any, paying a bill, it could be anything. They just say, okay, we'll do this, we'll do this. Very straightforward. The governor appoints the chairman of the controlling board, so he has that one vote for sure. And then there are 3 members of the Senate and 3 members of the Ohio House. In each case, 2 of those 3 are Republican, because we have the majority, and 1's a Democrat. So that means the governor's got his own vote, and he's got 1 Democratic senator's vote, and 1 Democratic member from the House of Representatives vote. That's 3 out of the 7. He needs 1 more vote. And Senator Widener, I believe it's Chris Widener, who is term limited out, so he doesn't have to worry about running for election again. He announced late last week that yes, he was going to vote with the governor, and he would provide the 4th vote to make Medicaid expansion go forward. So I do encourage you to make the phone calls and emails. In this instance, I don't think we're going to stop it. Yes, Grandma.
The rules of righteousness do win, but we have to concentrate on those rules of righteousness to pursue the liberty, to conquer the wickedness that is trying to consume us.
Amen.
So get busy.
What are the chances? I see a great problem in the way these bills were passed, with what you were describing. It's a huge problem, and I think it's a major problem in how we get stuck with ridiculous laws and unwanted laws, how they jam stuff in there, how you're not able to read it all, they give it to you at the last minute. What do you think the chances are of getting a group of people together to put a bill together to stop that practice and make it so that they cannot vote until everyone has had a chance to read that, and nobody can just shove something in there without being read?
Well, of course, it's wrong, obviously, for a bill with thousands of pages to be given to you days in advance and expected to change it. I'm on the Judiciary Committee, and we had a bill recently introduced, and all the bills go through committees for discussion and debate first, and the bill was 3 pages long. So the first thing I did was congratulate the sponsor of the bill, saying, you know, here's a bill I can actually read.
Yeah.
And so it's very frustrating. The answer is, I think, we need to change the Constitution, and I know that's a big, big problem, but if you've read Mark Levin's book, The Liberty Amendments, one of his proposed amendments to the U.S. Constitution, and there's no reason why we couldn't do this in Ohio, is to actually require any bill to sit for a period of up to a year, I think it reads. So it is, and that's appropriate. And there are obviously some topics that are complex, and maybe a bill is going to be longer than others, but 3,000 pages in 4 days is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Yes.
My question is that, is there any senators we can count on for backing up and standing for the 10th Amendment? I'm thinking specifically in this area of where the Supreme Court criminally, unconstitutionally said that a local school could not open up their day in prayer in the name of Jesus.
Yep. Amen. Well, you know, the 10th Amendment, the 10th Amendment, which says that all powers not granted to the federal government are retained to the states and the people. The 10th Amendment is the most ignored amendment of all. It's interesting when you look at the 10 amendments and you ask yourself, how many of them really do we have anymore? None. The right, freedom of practice of your religion, do we have that anymore? No. Freedom of speech, do we have that anymore? Well, do we have the rights to our guns anymore? Well, I've got my guns at least still, but they want to take those away. So it's the 10th Amendment, which in many ways could be the most important of the 10 amendments because of what it says. It says the federal government is caged, like a caged lion, that is not to be allowed to set free on us in our liberty, but it is restrained because we have all the power. That's what it says. But we have a Supreme Court which long ago gave up that battle. And we have a Congress which is lawless. Ed and I were talking earlier. I believe that if we're going to solve this problem, politically, it's going to have to be through a constitutional convention that reasserts our authority to preserve the rights of the states and the citizens in this country. I don't know how else we can do it, because Congress won't do it, certainly the President won't do it, not this President or any, I don't even think a Republican President. And certainly the Supreme Court is clearly going to defend our liberty. So we need to draw that power back from the federal government through the state legislatures.
Constitutional convention is dangerous.
Yes.
Constitutional convention is dangerous. However, what we're going through right now is dangerous.
Yes.
So
If states will start to stand up for the 10th Amendment and say this is clearly a violation.
the problem with I've had people say to me, well, we can file lawsuits. I mean, that's really, when you say the state should stand up for the 10th Amendment, what do? We file a lawsuit and we say this is a violation of the 10th Amendment, we don't have to do it. And take a topic, Obamacare. the Medicaid expansion, the highway fund. You take that topic. Ultimately, who has to determine that 10th Amendment's going to be upheld?
It's a
United
report.
States Supreme Court.
Oh,
And ultimately, they failed to do that. So until we can, frankly, just put more teeth into our Constitution, I think we're going to continue to have that
States
problem.
have to start to stand up and stand together.
Well, we as citizens have to stand up, and the states have to stand up.
Representative on that convention they're going to have about the balanced budget, are you going to look at that?
Yes, there has been a long-standing effort for, I think, 20 years now, to have a constitutional convention to install a balanced budget amendment at the federal level. There are already, I believe, 19 states that have called for a convention. And Skip, you should probably know this, was 34, I think, is the number of states we have to have, is that right? 34 states. So Ohio could be one of those. We have that balanced budget resolution in the House right now. I am a co-sponsor. I expect that will pass out of the House and through the Senate this year, or early next year. And if that's the case, you know, that may create some momentum to get towards the number needed to have a balanced budget amendment installed at the federal level. Now all that does is call for a convention, and then they have an amendment proposed at the convention, and then all the states have to approve it. So it's a long way from becoming law. And you can imagine, you know, when you see what's going on in Washington in the last month with this trying to control this spending, which is just ridiculous where we are. It's frightening where we are. When you look at that wringing of hands and all the anger, can you imagine if they saw coming down the pipe a constitutional convention that was going to say, well, you no longer can have deficit spending? Oh my gosh, it would, you know, sequester would be nothing compared to this. So I think that it could really have a tremendous effect even before it's passed, if it just looks like it might be passed. So we'll see where it goes. Yes.
I mean, I think you're wonderful, but I disagree on this constitutional convention. If they don't adhere to the Constitution now, why would you think they're going to listen when you change anything in the Constitution?
Yeah.
And by opening it up, you have people, just like you said, the things they stuck in already, they're going to do the same thing.
Well, this is the
It's very dangerous.
This is the counter argument that a constitutional convention could get out of control, be taken over by the liberals, and then you get something worse than what we have. But I have a question. What could be worse than what we have? We are not winning this battle politically.
yep.
We are not. And so, and I think that's a legitimate concern, and it's a debate we need to have. But my answer continues to be, if not this way, then how? Because I do not want this country to be in another war. That's not what I want. And I don't know how politically else we can solve this problem. But it's a serious debate to have.
Matt, do you mind if I interject something here on that? I mean,
Skip Claypool, former Jog County Commissioner, good man.
I have strong opinions on this particular subject. As you and as Mark Levin, our Constitution is being completely ignored today. It is basically non-existent. And so the risk is that they continue to degrade our Constitution. And if you considered the Constitutional Convention, 2/3 have to make amendments. Then they bring it back to the states. That you cannot just pass stuff willy-nilly. It ain't going to happen. You throw it in there, people have to digest it, the citizens of the state get to review it and to consider it, and then 3/4 of the states have to pass it. You know how hard that would be to get those amendments passed at the end of the day? And so it would at least get the dialogue on the table. We don't invite Dave Joyce. We don't invite Rob Portman. We don't invite Sherrod Brown. We tell them to stay at home. When we have the new Constitution put together, the refinements to the Constitution, not new Constitution, when we have the refinements done, we'll invite them to tell them what their new job is.
Thank you.
Okay?
Yes.
That is what I'd like to see. Let's get that Constitution back in order so we have a Constitution that they have to follow. Because there's rules in it that say, Sherrod Brown, I'm sorry, I know you like socialism, but this ain't a socialist country. And so anyway, that's my...
Well, and
Thank you.
It's also, you know, there's tremendous power in this process, and we have to keep in mind this is not some idea that somebody came up with. This is, they call it an Article 5 convention because it's in Article 5. And I brought a whole stack of constitutions for you. Look it up. Article 5, the document signed by our forefathers, our founding fathers. They created this process. Now, why did they put it in there? It's never been used. Never in 200 and some years. Never. Why has it been? But why is it there? It's there because they foresaw a day, and I think that day's here, when the federal government, despite everything else they said in that wonderful document, was running out of control. And it frankly has become our enemy. And as a result, they put a safety valve in there that said, here is a way to solve the problem. Now, will it work? I don't know. But I think we have to have some faith in the wisdom of our founding fathers and try. We have to try. One of the amendments proposed by Mark Levin in his book, and this may never see light of day, but it's a very intriguing amendment, is an amendment that would create essentially a super legislature involving the states. It essentially would say that any law passed by Congress could be overturned if 75% of the state legislatures voted against it. Now just think about that. We would not be arguing about Obamacare today if that was the case, because the state legislatures would overturn it. It's a way to it's a way to control the out of control federal government. So I suggest, and I don't make any money when you buy Mark Levin's book, but I suggest you buy his book, you read it, you consider it. He's a wonderful conservative, and I think well worth considering. So let me just take one or two more questions, and then I'll move on.
I'd like to go back to a K through 6 form of thinking. And even before people run for office, we should have a screening program that's going to clue us in as to what their thinking is going to be before we ever put them on the ballot.
This is so interesting. She says we should be able to screen people before they run for office. But Skip knows one of my pet peeves about Geauga County Republican Party has no political platform. We don't have a platform of our principles.
Or principles.
Yeah. So what our principles? So what does that mean? That means that if you used to be a Democrat and you're pro-abortion and pro-big government and pro-high tax, but your name happens to be, I don't know, Dolan, you can come into the Republican Party, and you're welcome because you've got money, you've got name recognition, you can get elected. And so it drives me crazy that we have Republicans that run that don't stand really for conservative principles. I was asked to meet with a candidate for Aurora mayor recently. Is anybody here from Aurora by any chance? You have one. Well, so I go to meet with, I'm going to tell you, it's John Monroe. He's running for mayor of Aurora. Not a bad guy, a good-looking guy. He's a businessman, successful. He's a good conservative, I was told. Maybe you should support him. So I go have breakfast with him. He's a nice enough guy, and we're exchanging stories and pleasantries. And he makes this comment, and I said, where do you stand on pro-life issues? He says, I believe in a woman's right to choose. Okay, well, where do you stand on traditional marriage? Well, I have a member of my family who's gay, so, I'm for gay marriage. I said, John, is there any part of the Democratic party you don't agree with? I mean, you're a Republican, right? So, well, not really. I pretty much agree with the Democrats. Okay, we have to have these kind of questions. I was with this candidate night coming up at the Chesterland Tea Party. I want to go to that tea party and ask some of those folks, hey, are you pro-life, pro-traditional marriage, anti-big government? Because if you're not, get out of here.
Yeah.
I am tired of people that say one thing and do another. Read that Rob Portman, that run and say one thing and then actually believe something else or at least do something else.
Yep.
And you're absolutely right. We have to find these people out, and we have to find out at the primary level so we can stop.
Yeah, stop it.
Did you have a question? Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems nowadays that the Republican Party has more liberal and moderate representatives and candidates than it does conservatives.
The Democratic Party, you said?
Republican.
Republican. Oh, yeah. Sure.
I used to be proud to be a Republican.
Yeah.
You got the John McCain's, you got, as you said, the full house, it seems like. Where do you stand on where do we go as Republicans as a party? And how do you feel about the Tea Party?
Well, I'm a Tea Party guy, but the Tea Party's not a political party, as we know, and it shouldn't. That's right. There are 99 members of the House, 60 Republicans, called the Republican Caucus. If you went into a meeting of the Republican Caucus and you said, okay, all the conservatives raise their hand, you probably get 58 people out of 60 raise their hand. Now, if you looked at their voting records, you'd wonder where those 58 people are, because in truth, I would say there's maybe 20 truly conservative folks out of the 60 Republicans. You know, this protest that we filed against the governor for attacking our constitutional form of government was only signed by 38.
Oh,
Only signed by 38. So that tells you something. What does that mean? Does that mean we abandon the Republican Party? That day may come. I like to, my wife thinks I'm crazy, but
you know?
I like to watch old Ronald Reagan speeches.
Yeah.
Just so I feel better.
Yeah.
And I saw his speech that he gave for Barry Goldwater. I think it was 62. Maybe it was 64. And he starts out the speech by saying, you know, I was a lifelong Democrat, but now I'm going another way. And I feel that, Todd. And I don't know what the political answer is, but it's definitely a problem. Yes.
I see that both the Democrats and the Republicans in the Senate are now looking to craft a way to keep other parties from getting on the ballot, making it more and more difficult again for that reason. And we're very tired of that.
Well, remember what I said earlier. For both parties, it's not about the principles that you may think they believe in. It's about maintaining power.
Absolutely.
And so you're right. There is a bill that's in the Senate now. It's going to come across to the House in a few weeks. They're going to push it through very, very fast. That will essentially rewrite the rules about how third parties can get on the ballot. It actually won't have much effect for local candidates, but for statewide candidates, it's going to be much more difficult. And there'll be lawsuits filed and arguments about it. It's going to sail through. Absolutely going to sail through.
Well, folks, we got to fight. We're not going to have a boring time. It's going to be a battle coming up tonight.
All right, I don't want to take up too much time. I know you've got other speakers.
Yeah, we have other one more question.
Yeah, Matt.
Loud, speak up.
I want to continue to educate myself on the process of our government and that, but I'm opposed to a constitutional convention. I don't want anybody messing with our Constitution. At least we have that, they can keep their hands off of it. Because you've got a lot of people that want to get in there. What if you open up a convention there and then we have a big terrorist incident like 9/11, where the whole climate changes and they say, well, this isn't going to work. This Constitution here is not going to work. I think we're going around in circles as long as we've got the Federal Reserve governing us, basically.
Well, the Federal Reserve's another topic, but I agree and I recognize the danger of a constitutional convention. I only ask that you consider the danger that we have. You know, one of the things that that I've always sort of in my mind done, I think my whole life is to look at balancing risk. It's all about risk. You know, what is the risk that our liberty will be further damaged by a constitutional convention? Well, there is some risk there. There's no question about it. You have to say there's a risk that bad things will happen with a constitutional convention. On the other side, there is the certainty that we're losing our liberty right now. Right now. So I have to take that certainty and balance it against that risk and say, am I willing to take this risk to stop this? Now, you know, it could go bad. But if we don't try every means to preserve our liberty, we're going to lose it all because we've already lost so much. So I would ask just consider that. And if you read Mark Levin's book, the first chapter, he makes the philosophical and legal argument for it. And so you can just read that first chapter, which I think you read free online, and it may help in that debate. But I understand your concern, and I share your concern. But to my mind, it's worth the risk. So
Sounds like a radio
thank you so
program,
much.
folks. Matt Lynch. wanted to say, he said everything his brother Bob told him to say.
Oh, my mom's my brother here.
He did, okay. Now, we've got, Sarah has got an announcement. She's going to come up here with a preacher's voice. Come on up here. And she's going to preach like,
I just have a comment. What Matt was saying about parties not having platforms, that's true pretty much across the board. Local parties don't have a platform that they stick to when they are evaluating a candidate. And I just wanted to make the comment that that's why it's important to vote based upon the character of the person and to get to know them and not based upon their party affiliation. Your local school board race, I have a list of suggested questions that if you email me, I will send you so that you have an idea of what kind of prickly questions you can ask them before you vote for them in November. That was my comment.
very good. All right, the next speaker, right here, you've all heard, read the book, or many of you, The Green